you know, a transient community of people who've moved in here and sorted their lives out a bit, got themselves together, possibly moved on, possibly not, in my case, not. But, you know, it's provided housing for a hell of a lot of people in 30 years.
There was probably about 12 people, and what I remember about it was I didn't have to cook, like probably once every 12 days or something, because everyone had to cook. There was a rota system, so I didn't have to do the housework every day, I didn't have to cook every day, I didn't have to shop every day. I had to do it like once every so often, and it was fantastic. I like that, because I'm not really a domesticised person, to be quite honest.
There was this Polish girl, and God, I was just in a fury at her the whole time because we pooled all our money and then we would each take turn making dinner, and she was like always really going for like the most basement bargains she could. So one day she comes home with like, I don't know, 4 pounds of pork chops, right, that just stank, you know. And she said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm going to soak them in vinegar." So she soaks these pork chops in vinegar, you know, and say, "I'm not going to eat these pork chops that have been soaked in vinegar and they're rotten, and why are you buying rotten food?" But anyway, after I left, she started sleeping with my boyfriend. So then I was mad at her for another reason.
I do remember in the first house that I visited before I moved on to Villa Road, you know, I'd be in the kitchen, you'd have people wandering in and out of this kitchen. There were teacups everywhere. You know, someone might take a teacup and just go rinse it for half a second in the sink. You'd be drinking out of these incredibly, to my mind now, and even then, grotty, you know, cups. But, you know, I was a kid. We were young. It didn't matter. I mean, we just sort of did it. So it was, and the house that I moved into, number 20, was much more tidy, and things like toilet paper instead of newspapers, you know, things like that. It was like, okay, I can live here. We have toilet roll. And we washed our glasses. We washed our mugs.
Hi, Pam.
Okay.
What you're looking at is a very first experiment of a system of, well, nomadic living, perhaps you could call it, but or perhaps retractable housing systems.
Pim, originally from Holland, came to Villa Road in the early 70s. Having lived in a teepee in California, he believed that the environmental way forward was for people to build their own dwellings. For a long time, he lived in a handmade hut in the garden of 31 Villa Road. He now squats a few doors down, living in a domed tent inside his house.
What often sort of strikes me when I wake up in the morning, the moment of opening your eyes and what is it that you see? And it often sort of strikes me how delightful it is that when you open your eyes and I just look up at the ceiling, well, it is not the ceiling, but look up at the sky, and how I see from the bottom down and then have this field of view. And it's a beautiful start of the day. And it is something that could be available to anyone.
In the 70s, all aspects of living were being called into question. These were the early days of feminism, and women on Villa Road were as keen to end male domination as to overthrow capitalism.
I think over time we had several different Marxist reading groups going on, but the one I remember in Villa Road, the one that I remember going to, was an all-women's Marxist reading group. And through that, I think we started to think about redefining our role as women.
We were doing consciousness raising, and we would go away for weekends and have weekends away and stuff. And we did things, you know, like we had our book called Our Body Ourselves, which was fantastic. And women learnt about how to have orgasms through spare rib and vibrators, which was absolutely fantastic. And I think, yeah, that was brilliant.
We read books, sort of Marxist sort of books, I suppose, We did self-examination, which was quite popular those days.
What does that mean?
Well, you know, when you examine... I remember one meeting that we had speculum, because Maureen's a doctor, so she could have them, and we examined ourselves and learnt about our bodies.
Which bit of your body?
She's going to be so embarrassed. There's all these... we tried to find out where our cervixes were, which was a journey in itself.
Do you remember examining your cervix?
No, I never did any of that. I didn't do any of that. But yes, that was going on. Lots of use of mirrors.
I realized that it is perhaps a useful exercise for human beings to try and live at the lowest possible level of standard of living, rather than always trying to get the higher up the ladder and get more and more and more. To sort of maybe perhaps less is perhaps also beautiful.
The Villa Road community governed itself. Villa Roaders were antagonistic to the police, who they viewed as an embodiment of their enemy, the state. Would you ever have called the police?
No.
What did you do instead?
Well, there were, where there were instances of theft and so on within the street, then those were dealt with at street meetings. And in one incident I remember, we jailed a guy for a week, I believe.
Everyone was losing their stereos. We eventually managed to catch this young black guy who was, I think, 15 at the time. And so he said that he had been thrown out of home, that he had nowhere to go, and he was stealing all this stuff so as he could survive. And so in typical Villa Road fashion, we held a street meeting, emergency street meeting, what to do about him. And we decided that we would give him a home, we'd give him somewhere to live, and we would give him money. And so he lived with us then.
Villa Roaders identified politically with the working class. They supported striking workers. They had a Villa Road banner and travelled en masse to march in support of the striking firemen and the Grunwick workers. They wanted to link the squatting struggle to other anti-capitalist struggles. Can you explain why, as squatters, you thought it was important to join ranks with workers?
Because the general atmosphere of the time was we were all believed in, everybody getting together, and the only way to change the world was for everybody to get together, to recognise that we all had interests in common, and so on, a sort of general leftism.
There was a strike on by the tarmac workers, and I went along on behalf of the squatters and spoke with a megaphone, just explaining that we supported their struggle and inviting them to, take part in a joint march on the town hall. The workers were going to be the ruling class of the future.
Xander Fraser even became a squatters' representative in the Transport and General Workers Union, allowed in as a mark of their solidarity with the Villa Road struggle.
They should be organised, and we are anxious that they should join forces with those of our...
Were you the only squatter who was a member of the T&G?
Well, I have to say, I did find it slightly unusual, yeah, because technically there wasn't... I was a building worker, so on that level, actually, I assume I was entitled to be there, but yeah, really, I was in that branch as a representative of Villa Road, not because I was working in the building trade.
Oh, no, watch out for this telephone thing. I just step over it.
This room is problems with flooring, but is a kind of communal workspace, and it functions quite well like that for us.
Some on the left had more ambitious political goals and were explicitly focused on building a revolution to overthrow the state. Piers Corbyn was an astrophysicist, a full-time squatting activist in West London, and a revolutionary. He was well known in squatting circles and always present at protests and demonstrations. Everybody seems to remember you charging around London with a carrier bag containing peanut butter sandwiches. That was your sole sustenance, is that right?
I used to eat a lot of peanut butter sandwiches, and I believe there's a jar of peanut butter over there still. Mainly the bags contained leaflets. In those days I was a member of the International Marxist Group, and I'd been so for 2 years.
I joined the IMG, and I was excited about being in this political organization. The IMG was a Trotskyist-derived group, and the initials stand for the International Marxist Group. And there is a very complex genealogy of the IMG's relationship to the Fourth International, which was, as you may know, the alternative to the Stalinist International.
What the IMG was, it was what they called itself the British section of the Fourth International, the Trotskyist Fourth International, which was like a liaison or alliance of revolutionary groups around the world. Their general activity was to build labour movement, support activity in trade unions and so on. So they saw this type of stuff as possibly peripheral or possibly not, and there was ambiguity.
Some hardline Trotskyist groups were unenthusiastic about getting involved in a political issue as woolly and vegetarian as squatting. They preferred to focus on workers' struggles, hoping to build a disciplined vanguard that would bring on the revolution. But some revolutionaries did take squatting seriously. Was the IMG the only revolutionary party? Oh, there's your phone.
Weather action? Oh, magic, how are you? Oh, fine. I'm just, it's all right, no, carry on. I'm being interviewed by some, there's a BBC here interviewing me about squatting and housing, but it doesn't matter, carry on, tell me. Bye. Sorry, yeah, someone just wanted something.
Yeah, so was the
Should have ignored that, really, shouldn't I?
Was the IMG the only revolutionary organisation to get behind squatting?
Yes, in a serious way, anyway.
The IMG, fanatical about correct Marxist terminology, nitpicked about whether or not squatting could, strictly speaking, be defined as a revolutionary act. On Villa Road, Pete Cooper had joined the party. Was squatting in and of itself a revolutionary act?
God, I can't remember. From the Trotskyist point of view, I think it would have been foolish not to engage the energies of these people who were clearly very willing to take part in direct action.
For you in the IMG, would you have said that squatting itself was a revolutionary act?
Well, some of us did, yes, because it was expropriation of property, and we said it had a dynamic of revolutionary act.
But for the IMG, the real point of demanding housing was not to get housing, but to expose the weaknesses of capitalism. Those demands for housing, what was it? Housing and jobs.
Not evictions and layoffs, yeah.
Well, they were, in kind of Trotskyist terms, those are transitional demands, are they?
Oh, that's right. Transitional demands were demands that couldn't really be met within the terms of the system.
So a transitional demand is a demand that that sounds like a reasonable demand,
yeah,
but that will expose the shortcomings of the capitalist state in their inability to deliver it.
Yeah, like housing for all seemed a reasonable thing. Why shouldn't everyone have somewhere to live? But actually the system probably couldn't deliver without fundamentally changing.
Could housing for all be achieved? Well, they would say, the IMG would say, no, it couldn't be achieved under capitalism. So this was therefore an intrinsic anti-capitalist demand, or what is called a transitional demand, which is something everybody wants, but can only be achieved if capitalism is destroyed. So the dynamic of the movement will lead to the destruction of capitalism, along with other sort of demands, other transitional demands, if support in a united front gets wide enough.
That is, I think, how Trotskyist method works, and that really made a lot of sense to me.
I have a bit of perhaps a compulsion, particularly when I keep passing by a particular spot, and there's every time the same kind of items there, and then this process of thinking straight in mind from what can I do with it, and particularly with these items, and